The world is built on three pillars: heat, steel, and a strong right arm. My name is Alaryk, and my world is defined by the absolute darkness of my workshop and the blinding white heart of my furnace. I am an armourer. A simple blacksmith creates tools to shape the earth. I create a skin of steel to shape destiny. The plague raging outside, the great mortality of 1348, has no place in my forge. It cannot survive the fire. My air is clean, purified by the burning oak charcoal that heats the metal to a brilliant, terrifying white. I start my day by pulling the great leather bellows, feeling the rush of air feed the flames until the heat hits my face like a physical blow. The furnace is my god. I give it cold, rigid steel, and it returns to me a fluid, living thing, ready to be mastered. Listen to the yard. It is a language, old and honest. Tink, tink, boom. Tink, tink, boom. It is the rhythmic, heavy conversation between my mallet and the anvil. To work steel, you must become part of its internal logic. I handle the metal with long, black tongs, my hands protected by heavy leather gloves, but my face can feel every temperature change. I am not just pounding a sheet of metal. I am teaching it to bend, to flow, to accommodate the curves of a human shoulder, the delicate complex of a knuckle. My workbench is covered in specialized tools, different hammers with pointed heads, flat heads, round heads, each one forged to solve a specific problem. I spend hours over the anvil, a silent god in this temple of fire, ensuring that every piece of plate armor is true. It must be strong enough to turn a lance, but thin enough to let a knight breathe and move. A perfect gauntlet must allow a hand to grip a sword with the same ease it grips a pen. A full plate harness is a masterpiece of geometry, but it is the ring mail, the Maille, that requires the patience of a saint. My apprentices spend their youth here, doing nothing but making tiny steel rings. We wind a wire around a thin rod, creating a spiral, and then cut each ring one by one, thousands of them. Then begins the joining. 4 rings into one, connected by a 5th. And every single ring must be riveted. We drill a hole in the overlap, insert a tiny pin, and flatten it, over and over, 10,000 times for a single hauberk. It is a slow, methodical alchemy. Each rivet is a prayer for safety. It is a flexible, interlocking skeleton that defends where the rigid plate cannot. My hands are stained by the black oil and grey dust of the metal, and my fingers often forget how to do anything but grasp a pair of small, precise pliers. But I know that when a knight falls, it is often not his plate armor that has failed, but the silent, overlooked Maille that has saved his life. Steel is a fickle mistress, too soft, and a sword will shear through it like butter. Too hard, and it will shatter like glass under the first heavy blow. The secret lies in the quench. I stand by the great wooden vat of oil, the air thick with the smell of rendered animal fat and sharp vinegar. I pull the breastplate from the forge at the exact moment it turns the color of a setting sun, a cherry red that seems to glow from within. I plunge it into the oil. The sound is like 1,000 angry vipers. a violent hiss that fills the workshop with a choking grey cloud. This is the moment of truth. If the metal screams too loud, it has cracked. If it remains silent, it hasn't taken the heart of the fire. I hold it there, my muscles straining against the heat until the steel is reborn. Then comes the tempering, heating it again to a pale blue straw color to give it back its soul, its flexibility. A good armorer doesn't just shape metal, he negotiates with its spirit. A knight does not want a dull suit of iron. He wants to be a reflection of the sun. The polishing is the longest, most grueling part of my labor. We use emery stones, fine river sand, and trips of old leather soaked in oil. My apprentices spend weeks rubbing a single greave until the surface is so smooth you can see your own weary face in it. This is not just for vanity. A polished surface deflects a blade. A rough one catches the edge. For the great lords, those who still believe they will survive the year 1348, I perform the bluing, heating the steel until a deep royal indigo bloom appears on the surface, protecting it from the rust of the damp English winters. We etch patterns of lions and crosses with acid, filling the grooves with gold wire. It is a work of art that will be covered in blood, a paradox of beauty and slaughter. I am the only man who knows the true shape of the lord of the manor. I have measured his shoulders, the thickness of his thighs, the curve of his spine. A suit of armor is a second skin. If a joint is off by a hair's breadth, it will pinch the flesh, or worse, leave a gap for a dagger's point. I remember my last client, a young knight, full of fire and dreams of glory in France. I fitted him for a new bassinet helmet while the village bells were tolling for the plague dead. He stood there, shivering not from the cold, but from the fear that he would die in his bed instead of on the battlefield. I hammered the rivets, closing him into his steel shell, and for a moment he looked invincible. But steel cannot turn back the breath of the pestilence. I wonder sometimes as I polish these empty suits of armor, am I building protection, or am I just forging beautiful coffins? My body is a map of my failures and my forge. My forearms are covered in small white circular scars, the kisses of the spark, where molten iron has leaped from the anvil. My right shoulder is lower than my left, pulled down by 30 years of swinging the 4-pound mallet. And then there is the armorer's silence. The constant clacker-clack of the hammers and the roar of the furnace have stolen the soft sounds of the world from me. I can no longer hear the birds in the rafters or the whispers of my wife. I only hear the metal. My lungs are heavy with the soot of the charcoal and the fine grey dust of the grinding wheel. We are men of iron, and slowly the iron enters us. We smell of sulfur and sweat, and our skin is the color of old leather. We pay for the eternity of our work with the swift decay of our flesh. As I carve my mark, a small crowned anvil, into the interior of the breastplate, I feel a strange sense of peace. The man who wears this will fall. The lord who paid for it will rot. Even the castle above me may one day be a ruin of ivy and stone. But this steel, this will remain. Buried in the earth or hung in a cold cathedral, my work will endure. Hundreds of years from now, People will find this gauntlet and marvel at the articulation of the thumb, the strength of the rivets, the curve of the plate. They will not know my name, but they will know my hand. I am Alaryk. I am the man who took the raw earth and turned it into the bones of war. In 1348, when everything else is turning to dust, I am the only one making something that truly lasts. People see the knight in his shining plate and think of chivalry. I see the price of 100 cows. In 1348, a full harness of armor is not just protection, it is a fortune forged in iron. To buy a custom-made breastplate, a farmer would have to toil for 10 years and never eat a morsel of his own grain. Iron is expensive, but the skill is what drains the purse. I pay my charcoal burners in silver because without their high-grade oak coal, my furnace is just a cold pile of stones. My steel comes from the distant hills, brought by carters who risk the plague-ridden roads for a premium. When I quote a price to a local lord, I see him flinch. He tries to haggle, but I show him my tools, my apprentices, and the weeks of fuel I've burned. In this year of death, coin is losing its value, but steel is the only currency that still commands respect. If you want to live through a battle, you pay the armorer's tax. There are no discounts for survival. My house is attached to the forge, but the two worlds are separated by more than just a stone wall. Inside, my wife, Elena, tries to keep the soot from our bedsheets, a battle she has been losing for 20 years. She is the one who tends my burns with honey and elderflower, and she is the one who bears the silence of my deafness with a patient smile. I have 2 sons. The eldest, Julian, is already at the anvil. His arms are growing thick, and his eyes have learned to judge the heat of the fire. But I see him look at the red crosses on the doors in the village, and I see the fear in his hands. I am teaching him a trade that requires a future, but 1348 offers no such promise. My youngest doesn't want the hammer, he wants the church. He thinks the collar will protect him better than a gorget. We eat our pottage in the shadow of the furnace, the rhythmic thud of the neighbor's death cart a constant reminder that our family's legacy is as fragile as a flawed weld. We are a family built on iron, but even iron can be broken by the breath of the air. They think the armorer is rich, and in truth, I have more silver hidden under my floorboards than the miller and the baker combined. But what is silver when the markets are empty? I live in a gilded cage. I have the finest tools and a cellar full of ale, but I cannot buy safety for my children. My quality of life is measured in the heat of my forge. While others huddle in damp cottages, I am always warm, sometimes too warm. But the air I breathe is a slow poison. My skin is permanently etched with the gray grime of the grinding wheel, and my food always tastes of sulfur and metallic dust. We eat better than the peasants, meat twice a week, and white bread when the flour arrives. But my platim za это годами своей жизни. We are the elite of the craftsmen, yet we live like slaves to the anvil. Our wealth is a heavy burden, a suit of armor that we can never truly take off. The greatest problem I face is not the fire, but the hidden flaw. In these times, the quality of the raw iron has dropped. The mines are half empty, the best miners dead or fled. I often find slags and impurities hidden deep within a bloom of iron. If I don't catch it during the folding, the breastplate will fail at the first touch of a mace. Every day is a struggle against the decay of the world. The leather for the straps is getting harder to find, as the tanners have succumbed to the rot. The oil for the quench is rancid. I am trying to maintain the standards of my father in a world that is falling into ruin. I spend my nights by a single candle, inspecting my work for the tiniest hairline crack. If I send a man to war in a flawed harness, I am as much a murderer as the man who stabs him. My reputation is my only armor, and in 1348, it is the only thing I have left to protect.